converted on your.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Founder Maids Power Hour. I'm just waiting for some of the people to come in, so just wait a couple minutes. But for those of you who haven't joined our Power Hour, we launched this in the midst of the pandemic to help empower founders and empower business leaders to keep building during uncertain times. So today we have some incredible speakers from our community and leaders in our community. Michelle Romano, Shauna Randava, and Chris Pinkerton. Chris, welcome, Chris. And Chris, I want to know, I mean, you do so many different things, and I love your background from Clearco, but just give me some background on you working with, how do you work with companies? And then we can go from there.
Yeah, I have a interesting background. I've worked for several startups in my career. I've been through acquisitions. I've been on the other side with public companies that are acquiring kind of startup brands. And I've also had the painful process of trying to raise capital too with other founders. And I came across kind of Michelle and ClearBank and now Clearco several years ago. And I just thought it was such a fascinating model that it was a bit disruptive to how you would raise capital today. And so I could not resist in trying to join this company because I understood the opportunity that was out there. And today I work with the partnerships team. Basically what we do is we try and build an ecosystem of venture capital partners, incubators, agencies, platform providers, tools that we can tie into our founder ecosystem to help them continue to grow and scale their business in ways that can kind of short circuit or connect the dots quickly for them to be able to grow a brand, because it's there's a lot of information out there and it can be very confusing sometimes. So I'm just pumped to be able to do that every day.
I love how Clearco is the friend of the founder on the financing side, on the building your business and capital raising side. It's really, and now on the M&A side, which is even, it's just the full ecosystem. I keep telling my team, I'm like, I thought of these different businesses, but I never thought of them all together the way that, Michelle and her team have figured this out. So super impressive. And for those of you who've joined our community, please in the chat, just write, where you're from, what you need help with. Just, I want to make sure that we get some community, some community comments, and then there's no wrong question. We're going to be moderating some of the questions, but please feel free to just ask questions as this conversation arises. So Chris, with that, I'll have you can go ahead and moderate.
Awesome. Thanks, Megan. And, thank you to, the team for hosting this, because it's a super relevant topic. And I think it's a topic that will resonate with every founder, every leader, every aspiring entrepreneur, talking really about failure and how that can kind of fuel your knowledge and continue to grow your success. So if we can maybe jump into the overview of what we're going to cover today, then what we can really do is kind of talk about the kind of journey of what being a founder is all about, and the things that you learn along that way, and some significant hurdles that you face, and how that kind of shapes your perspective, builds perseverance, and makes you a better founder. And specifically today, we have two incredible female founders that have experienced, I think, all the highs and lows of being a founder. And today what we're going to do is explore those and truly try to understand how you can take a failure and convert that into a learning that can make you a better business leader and a better founder into the future. So rather than myself introducing our two guests today, maybe I'll get them to introduce themselves, because they have a remarkable background, and I think in their own words, it's probably a better kickoff. So Michelle, maybe I can kick it over to you first to start it today.
Yeah, of course. Well, look, it's a pleasure to be here with you all. And thank you so much for doing this. I know that August 11th is like the peak of the summer. So I really appreciate everyone joining us. So, I mean, I've been a serial entrepreneur my whole life. I really don't know how to do much of anything else. Went to school for engineering, was crazy enough to figure out that worldwide supply of sturgeon caviar of all products was down by 95%. Because the world had overfished the Caspian Sea. So as my first business, I moved to the East Coast and built a fishery from scratch. That's everything it sounds like: boats, fishermen, my hands knee deep in fish. And that was the beginning of my crazy entrepreneurial journey. That was ended up, and I should, it's very on topic. That was a massive failure because we went into a giant recession in 2008, and I was selling the world's most unnecessary luxury product. And so anyway, I had to deal with that very early on and figure out that the world owes me absolutely nothing. From there, went on to build an e-commerce site that's publicly traded called Emerge, an app that I sold to Groupon in 2014. And then my next pivotal point in my career came when I was 28 years old and got to join the cast of, the Canadian version of Shark Tank, or we call it Dragon's Den in Canada. And for the first time in my life, I was sitting as an investor and not a founder. And I think everyone's like, well, weren't you happy to be there? I was like, I felt like the poorest. I felt like the runt of the litter. And so I think I saw these pitches a little bit differently than everyone else. And what I was hearing is all these founders come on the show saying like, look, I'm looking for $100,000 and willing to give up 10% of my business. And what was fascinating is when you ask those founders what they needed the capital for, it was always the same two things. It was always, I need money for ads and I need money for inventory. And I remember thinking, why are founders using the most expensive capital in the world to do something that really has a fixed return? And so I remember Andrew and I put our heads together. I came back the next day on the show and I said, look, we're going to throw out a new deal type. I'm going to give you that same $100,000 you were looking for, but instead of taking 10% of your business that I will own forever, just give me 10% of your revenue until you pay me back my capital plus 6%. So really inexpensive, not a loan because there was no personal guarantees, so much easier for founders. I said, the only hitch in my deal is I have to see your Facebook ad data. And in some ways, the rest is a little bit of history. I mean, that became what Clearco is today. We've invested more than $2 billion in 5,500 different founders around the world. So we've become definitely the largest e-commerce investor in the space. And, now we're on a mission to just make it easier for anyone to build a company. So I'm sorry if that was slightly long-winded, Chris, but that is the story on how I got here, and wonderful to be here with you, Shanna.
No, that's great, Michelle. And we look forward to digging into the bumps and bruises along the way, probably till you got to this point. But Shauna, can you introduce yourself and kind of tell us your origin story of how you got to where you are?
Of course. I think we play a unique role at Lauder in terms of just the support that we do from a brand building and founder creation perspective. But I've been at Lauder for 6.5 years. I've been leading the M&A team for much of that time. Over the last year, the organization's asked me to build out a new capability whereby we are working even earlier on in the life cycle of brands. So really playing anywhere from investing in founders and nurturing their startups and their emerging brands to actually playing and getting our hands dirty as founders ourselves. So really reinventing and reimagining the role that a corporation can play in incubation and new brand creation. So I think we are able to experience kind of the founder story from both sides as an investor, but also building on our legacy of founders and everything that was created by Estee herself.
That's tremendous, Shauna. And just a reminder to everyone, we do have our comments and chat open as well as our social channels. So if you do have any questions for Shauna or Michelle, we will try and get to them during this session. And we'll dive in. Before we get into kind of the failures along the way and the bumps and bruises, maybe if we could start with, what do you think is the biggest hurdle or barrier to becoming a founder or a leader? Maybe Michelle, do you want to start off and pass over to Shauna as well?
Yeah. And Shauna, I'd love to know what you did before Estee Lauder, because it's a very cool role that you have now. The biggest significant hurdle to becoming a leader or a founder is just starting. It's honestly, it's one of those things where if you overthink it, you are like never ready. Your business plan's never perfect. The market's never perfect. It's a really, really, you just have to I always describe it as like you're looking at the swimming pool, the water's really cold, it's going to be miserable. And there is literally just no other choice but to jump in. And that has been every single time I have started a business, I have not felt ready. The market's not felt quite right. And things are really, the other thing that I always like to describe is how early things are when they start out. So I mean, Andrew and I decided we wanted to build something in the fintech industry in 2015. And now it's like, oh my God, fintech's on fire. And there's, multiple multi-billion-dollar exits and that's all happening. But when we started in 2015, like this was barely an industry, right? What we had to go off of is that Simple, which was an early attempt at a debit card, had sold to BBVA, which is a bank no one had ever heard about, for like less than $100 million. I remember thinking like, oh, that might be a good exit. But that's how early things were. I mean, we were literally building plumbing rails because you had to pull products off some of these banks and things had to be compliant. And so it didn't feel like it feels like today. It's actually the same way that e-commerce felt like when I started in e-commerce in 2010. It's actually a really good story. I worked at Sears, believe it or not, for a year after the Caviar business failed. And believe it, at the time in 2010, they were the largest e-commerce retailer in Canada. And they literally thought about e-commerce. They had 300 stores and e-commerce was one of those 300 stores. That was the type of volume it made up. And so now the fact that we're here 10 years later, talking about, 20% penetration, it's like pretty crazy to me.
Yeah, that is crazy. And Shauna, what is your kind of view? I mean, you see the other side of founders a lot of times in your day-to-day. They're coming to you with their business models. Can you kind of walk us through what you see the biggest hurdle and barriers are for them to kind of get going in their business?
I think you're going to think I'm tying it into the title of this, of our panel today, but really it is, you have to navigate failure and you have to understand how to fail fast and pivot quickly. Because I think that really inherently, if you're building a modern brand of the future, you're testing the market and testing the consumer. So you really need to understand how to continue to build on that, embrace it, but also understand when and have the wisdom on when to pull back. And I think that's critical for a founder because coming from the corporate side, we inherently are risk averse. So it's really allowing us to bring in those types of risk takers into the consumer experience. It is probably the most critical component. And back to Michelle really quickly, I was an investment banker before this. So I think you and I both share the concept of, I believe there's creativity and innovation, even in the financial realm and the structuring realm of this world. And we're really pushing that piece as well at Lauder.
It's awesome.
That's great. Thanks, Shauna. And so now let's kind of dig into the main topic of today's discussion, which is really about failures and how failures kind of shape the way that you see the world and how you kind of build grit as a founder. So maybe Michelle, if you're willing to disclose, like, what is your biggest failure that you could share with other founders?
Oh, I don't even know if I have a biggest, because like there has been like so many along the way. I think this is a career where I feel like you get like smacked in the face at least once a week. Like something just goes wrong and you don't really know how to deal with it. I mean, the first business failed that I was a part of, and it failed because of market conditions, but it still doesn't, like, here's the thing as a founder, it's like everything's your job. It doesn't really matter if you're failing because the market sucks, because your idea sucks, because your team sucks, because your team's all fighting with each other. Like those are all things that are, your job. Everything at the end of the day rolls up to you. And so, if you can take the time to be thoughtful and responsible about like, okay, these are just problems and I have to solve them, and go into that problem solving mood. I don't know another way to move beyond this. And then I think you have to develop this mindset where every failure gives you an additional layer of armor as a founder. And I do feel like that's been, it just, it takes a lot to face me. I've had every version of legal scenario go wrong. I've had companies that felt like they were going to go bankrupt, not for weeks, but for months, but for 6 months. I've had employees do terrible things to me. These are all part of the, like, unfortunately pretty normal bumps along the way. And so, I think one of the things that I also learned is I had a really bad scenario at an earlier company where we had a deal go bad and like things got very, very bad for us. And I remember every day I just go to bed and I was like, I'm just going to fight one more day. And I remember I told myself that I was fighting one more day for 6 months. So, you would be surprised. I love, the David Goggins line where he talks about, when you have no more left, you literally think you can't run another mile, you can't like take another step, you actually have another 60% left in you. And there's lots of moments that I've had to tap into that as a founder and just really appreciate that there was, I had way more fuel in the tank than I was giving myself credit for.
Yeah, no, that's great. We have a lot of questions coming in because I think this is a topic that resonates with a ton of people. So I'll dive into a few of these in a minute. But Shauna, as kind of a leader in an organization that deals with a lot of founders every single day, and you see a lot of founders, I think, how would you kind of position that as a leader, some of the bumps in the road for yourself in getting your career, but also what have you seen in kind of your founder network as well?
I think in either scenario, being humble is probably the most critical aspect. So on our end, being humble and understanding gaps in our skill sets are what we're delivering to the consumer, and really having our eyes open to that, and accepting that there are others who can do something that deliver something that we can't deliver at this time. And I think being humble on the other end, I think Michelle is exactly correct in terms of the founder does, especially at the beginning, wear a hat and wear many hats. But I think as the brand evolves, it's really understanding, you know, what is your core like skill set and where do you need to supplement, and really bringing on a team that supports those and actually enables you to do what you do bring best, I think has been a critical, you know, factor that we've been weighing into our selection, is really just what was the mindset and the approach of the team that was built around that founder.
No, that's really great. And I think that aligns with some of the questions that we're getting today. And one of them, which I think is a good jumping off point, is we had a question about judgment. When you're hitting failure kind of repeatedly, when do you call it quits? Or what is the judgment that you need to have to understand when you need to pivot or when you need to rethink what you're doing because failure is seeming kind of overwhelming at that stage? Michelle, do you want to kind of tackle that one?
Yeah, I think, look, this is the hardest question I get asked, period, because there is no perfect answer. I can tell you that when you pivot, you always feel like you waited for too long. So you never quite feel like you did it fast enough. But the other thing is, it's really important as a founder to put yourself on a timeline. So, and I mean, I still believe this. I think you can test most ideas between, I don't know, $10,000 and $30,000. And with 3 months of time. And if you are not putting yourself on that timeline of being like, I need to see this kind of traction by this date to continue to do this, or, you know, this is where I'm all in, or this is where I invest more money, like founder, like that goal-oriented approach in the early days is absolutely critical to getting you to the point that that you can do that, because without that, it becomes a game. And then the other thing is, what you're doing is you need to be running experiments. So when I say you can try any idea in 3 months, I'm not talking about like you can write a business plan in 3 months. Like I'm actually saying you can like get a sample made, you can get a Kickstarter done, you can launch it, you can see if anyone wants what you just invented. And then you can decide if you really double down and do this. And so you're not making a plan, you're not doing market research, you're actually seeing if there's something there. And then what you're doing is you're taking the top 20% of things that are working and you're looking for those signals from the market, and you're like, okay, could I do something that piggybacks off this? Or like, because what a lot of founders do is they're not looking for early inputs in the market. They're looking for what they like, or what their friends like, or what their people in their circle are liking. Those people don't matter. The only thing that matters is when you put something on the internet, do other people that are strangers and have no vested interest in you like that. And I think the sooner you can be honest with yourself on, is that the case or not, the more likely you are to succeed.
Yeah, and some of the comments we're getting are comments like, I'm eating a lot of humble pie lately, and it's founders trying to get in the right mental space to continue to persevere. And one of the questions we had, Shauna, which I think is great for you to address, is how to pick a partner, because as you're going through this process with somebody and building a business, the perspective of your partner, I think, has a lot to do with how the business perseveres. So do you have any kind of insider stories around picking a partner?
I think it's the balance of skill set, but I think it's a shared vision, right? Like each one of you have to be passionate about what you're trying to build and understand that and be able to carry it on. I think, unfortunately, but I'll use it as an example. When Brandon set up Deciem, back in the day. He brought on Nicola, and he understood kind of the balance that she brought as a leader to him, but he was also able to impart kind of the vision of what he was trying to build. And they were each able to then direct it into kind of the culture of the company and, embody it. And I think that has been, unfortunately, Brandon is no longer with us, but Nicola has really been able to carry that on. And I think it was just a critical piece of, that initial selection to make that aligned them from that get-go. And so I think it's really that shared passion, but also the complementary skill sets, and maybe also, I would say, personalities. To some degree, there's the risk taker, there's kind of the risk moderator, and I think that is also a helpful balance in these processes.
Yeah, that's great. And Michelle, I know you've had several business partners along your journey. Do you have any advice for somebody that's either picking a co-founder or bringing a new leader into the business?
Yeah, I mean, it's very difficult, and I just consider myself very lucky, right? I found my first two co-founders in undergrad. I worked with Tully for 10 years in my career. It was like an incredibly successful relationship, and I don't think we fully knew at the time. I think one of the things that I'd look for is that you don't always have to be doing things for the exact right reasons, but you have to want the same outcome. That has been really, really, really critical. I think that I look at the push and pull between me and Andrew. We're actually very different people. We see the world, very differently. I am way more sales and operations driven. He is way more product driven. And I mean, we joke all the time, if I was running this company alone, it would be, half the size. And if he was running it alone, it would have gone bankrupt 50 times. So I think there's a reality around that. And so I get that it's hard. It's even harder in a COVID world. But you want to kind of start and be looking for those signals. And especially if you're the sole founder yourself, bringing in a co-founder, you want to be able to give yourself a couple of exit ramps where it's like, okay, if this isn't working, then we can do things, because co-founder relationship is one of the most intense relationships in the world. It's effectively a marriage where you split all your assets with no sex. And so that's very intense for a lot of reasons. And so, taking the time to work at that, I think, is incredibly important as well.
And I think an interesting other perspective of this, and because you're both investors, I think this would be maybe a good thing to address. When somebody is coming in to pitch to you, what are the signals or signs that you're looking for that they have the perseverance or the grit to continue to drive forward in a business? Are there attributes that you look for or can see in a founder that they have it? Shauna, do you maybe want to approach that one?
So we're consumer-led, brand-led, I think empathy, right? True empathy. So was there really an understanding and a purpose from the founder to build out that brand? I think that delivers the authenticity. It also helps fuel the future innovation. I think sometimes as we're kind of doing our incubation activities, there's a way to be formulaic in the approach, and that will only take you so far. And I think what kind of is the truly unique factor is kind of that empathy and the ability to connect with the consumer authentically. I think it's critical kind of for a long-term sustainable brand from our, as we kind of are doing pattern recognition, that's probably one of the key factors that we kind of teed into.
That's great. Michelle, are there any attributes that you look for when you're getting pitched?
Yeah, I can give you a couple of thoughts. So I think I would piggyback off Shauna. So empathy is incredibly important. I mean, if you think about it, we've built a $2 billion business on a group of people that literally no one cared about. And it was, and I say that in like the craziest way, right? Your options before Clearco existed were go to a bank and give up a personal guarantee to get your business funded, or go to a VC. And to put that into perspective on how small that VC market was, I mean, there are 25 million e-commerce businesses and less than 5,000 of them have been VC funded. So like we're talking about the 99.9% of businesses that wanted an option that was non-dilutive, so it didn't take your company, which you never get back once you give it away, and then allowed you to keep control, and also didn't put all of your personal assets and everything that you had earned yourself on the line. And so I think I would have never understood that if I wasn't a founder myself and I had been rejected, 850 times by VCs. In fact, another good failure rejection story is when we first had this idea, we obviously had to go raise this capital ourselves to be able to deploy to founders. And I did something like 150 meetings on Wall Street and literally got 149 no's. Like I had people tell me like, Miss, you don't understand credit. Like this will never work. I was like, I'm pretty sure the data from these businesses is going to be more indicative than their personal assets will be. And it was, it just took a long time to prove that. And so if you're hearing no a lot, that often means that you're on the right track. And again, not hearing no from your customers, hearing no from other people around you in the ecosystem. And then I think you just need to have a little bit of this chip on your shoulder if you're going to be successful. Like you have to kind of like, I don't know, get excited when people underestimate you, because that happens the whole time you are building. And so I love founders where I've seen them do something much harder than build a company. You know what I mean? Some of the best founders are people that have escaped terrible countries, have had all sorts of life experiences where they're like, oh, you think that this is going to stop me now? Those are generally very good signs that people have a lot of grit and resilience. People who can recover quickly. I mean, again, this is like, you know, you're in a boxing match and you're getting punched in the face and like, you got to come back tomorrow and be like, I'm just excited to try the next thing out. And so I ask a lot of questions around, you know, what's the hardest thing you've done? You know, how have you had to take other life experiences and translate them into resilience? And then in some ways it's like, how bad do you want this? Because there is a lot of easier jobs, easier off-ramps than trying to build something from scratch. This is a game where you constantly are, even when you, you know, feel like you have accolades, there's many, many, many days that you're like, this is a disaster and I am just trying to hold sand together. That's what it feels like. That's my best analogy.
So completely. I think a lot of the bumps and bruises along the way are related to raising capital and finance. A lot of our questions today are around those questions. And so maybe Shauna, maybe you could start us off with talking about some of the biggest challenges founders face when trying to raise capital, or even navigate the space. What are you seeing out there?
I think the strongest founders that can navigate this space are ones that have clearly articulated the need and what the need and the support they require from the investors that come into their cap table. And they connect with that very early on and are not necessarily focused on attaining the highest valuation or the highest headline number or getting the most capital, but it's really connecting the needs of the business with the needs, the future needs of the business, and understanding how they want to balance between those two and bringing on the right partners to help advise them during that process.
Mm-hmm. And Michelle, early on in your career, how did you navigate the raising capital space? Like, did you go to somebody as a mentor, or how did you even know where to start?
So I was just responding to a question in the chat. Oh my God, capital raising is extremely complicated. In fact, the funniest story is I actually met Andrew because I was trying to figure out how to raise capital. I'd been an entrepreneur for 6 years, had never been able to raise external capital before. This is, the best way to describe it is like, it's a game of inside baseball, which is really what it is. Look, 40% of VCs went to Harvard or Stanford. And so if you went to Harvard and Stanford yourself, you have no problem raising venture capital because they're all your friends. But the vast majority of people do not go to Harvard and Stanford. And so the system is designed, and I don't think it's, I don't think anyone was trying to be, negative when they did this, but the system is designed that it's a human to human business. So you meet someone, VCs literally work on the system of they will only take warm email introductions. That's the first gate that you have to get through, is you have to know someone in their network, and then they will meet with you, and then they will judge your business. And then you have to effectively get yourself into a bidding war, because that's how you drive the highest valuation for your company. And so you don't need to meet with 5 VCs, you would need to meet with closer to 100 VCs to get to the point where you're driving the terms and the valuation that you want for the company. And so frankly, like, the whole system is pretty rigged, and it's pretty rigged if you're not part of those circles, which is exactly why that we see the stats that we do, right? It's exactly why women get 2% of VC funding. It's exactly why none of the funding goes to minority founders, because it's a system that effectively works on who you know, not what your business is. And so I think that's one of the reasons why what we've done is so powerful, is we've been able to take out a lot of those biases. I mean, we funded 8 times more women than the venture capital industry average, and 30% of our founders are people of color, and even more like geographic diversity. Like, I'll just pick a random country. Like in the UK, 70% of our founders live outside of London. I mean, that never happened. Like literally the entire VC industry is 90% London if you were in the UK. And so that's just describing the system as it is. If you want, VC funding, that's certainly something that we help a lot of founders set up and figure out how they can do that, right? People use our capital to get, to drive their sales. So they're at the point where they're ready to fundraise. They have a solid story. They have great sales numbers. They have lots of options. And those are really the secrets. And then you spend a lot of time. I mean, I can tell you maybe one last story. When we did this last round with SoftBank and our Series C, we put together a pitch deck in November. And Sean, I know you'll appreciate this as an investment banker. And we put together a story. And then we started doing practice pitches, with what we call friendlies, which are, existing people on our cap table. And we did, I'm not joking, there was probably 100 hours of work put into like building that story, practicing the pitch, like figuring out if we had things done. And then we came back after Christmas and we're like, this pitch isn't strong enough. And we literally started slide one again from scratch and spent another 100 hours rebuilding the story, rebuilding the stats we want. Like this is why I think we've been successful, because this is not only a process where you have to know the right people, but you have to do a really fucking good job. Like if you're going to show up for a VC pitch and not pitch at 90%, you might as well not show up, because that is the bar you need to get to the next level. And so I just try and be honest with what it takes and how much work it is to create and build those stories.
Yeah, to jump off that point, Shauna, when you see pitches yourself, what are you looking for outside the unit economics of the business and the opportunity? Like, what are some of those attributes?
I think it's someone who's really clarified what the white space is, what the true white space is, and how they uniquely are going to own that white space, and how that's something that can be sustainable in the long term. That's, for us, that's what we focus on. We're brand builders, and we're looking for something that's going to be the next $500 to $1 billion brand in 10 to 20 years, not something that's caught in a moment or a trend. So for us, that's really critically important. I think it's also demonstrating that you do have a competencies across all touch points of a brand. So you have the product competencies, you have unique product competencies, you have unique creative talent that you're bringing to. And I think particularly in the space that we're playing in with my team, it's really how you're going to reinvent what the consumer, how the consumer experience is. So pick any touch point. Is it, the shopping experience? Is it how they're consuming content and then purchasing? Is it the territory? So to Michelle's point, we're global. So how are you going to reinvent beauty in India and China? And so it's really kind of having that game. What's the breakthrough innovation, but what's the ownable innovation across, time?
That's really good. I'm seeing a lot of comments that are actually more statements around I'm barely holding on here and I'm fatigued, and there's comments that are popping up. And the journey of a founder is the highest highs and the lowest lows. How do you guys personally kind of stay grounded? Are there things you do in your daily routine or things that can keep you centered so you're not dipping into the lowest low and you're kind of trying to keep some equilibrium there? Michelle, maybe you can start there.
Sure. So I'll give you a couple of tips. The first is you need co-founders and people around you that are other founders. And it's such a unique experience to go through this. It's like think about it, it's like trying to empathize with a new mother. Like until you've done it, it's like, oh, I don't really know exactly what you're going through. And so I've had incredible co-founders, and I've had incredible other founders in my network that have just reminded me that every time it felt like there was something that wasn't going to work in their business, they pulled it out. And so that's super critical. The second is I actually read a lot of books about other founders. And so whether you're reading the book of how McDonald's or Apple or Nike or any of these iconic companies, I mean, Estee Lauder was built, like these stories are littered with almost not making it the whole way. So it reminds you that your story is no different than others. And then I think focus and prioritization. It is very easy to just become, a workaholic in this kind of business. And that's not really what gets you there. And so that's like taking time to think and reprioritize. That's remembering you can only do 3 things a day. That's like, what are you ruthless at doing the right things that move the needle forward? Because it is so easy, especially with notifications on our phones, to just start doing what someone's pinging you on. That is not the most important thing. The most important thing is like, here, like, have I been really thoughtful about these are the 3 things that drive my company forward? And so going back to that, like, really reduces my ability when I feel super overwhelmed. And I know those sound, pretty simple, but they've actually been the ones that I've come back to, like, time and time and time again. And I mean, if you're out there and you're feeling that, I totally get it. You're just like looking for that next big break. And that, trust me, when you keep putting in the effort, something always does give.
No, that's great. And Sean, I'm sure your daily calendar crosses 3 or 4 time zones every day. And so how do you stay centered yourself in kind of tackling the ups and downs?
I think you just have to, it's cliche to say, but you do have to act. We love what we do. I know one of my colleagues on my team was on vacation, and I was like, I'm sorry I interrupted your entire vacation with your family. And he was like, it's okay. I love what I'm doing right now. And, I think we have a very unique position where we get to be inspired. We meet, countless founders, 250 founders a quarter. And so you're sitting there and you're seeing just what they're trying to do and what they're trying to build, and we're able to enable it. So for us, the frustration is are we doing enough? We're a mighty team of 2. We obviously have the broader corporation that's supporting us, but our ambition is so big. To Michelle's point, we're really struggling with how do we prioritize and accept that there's some areas that we'll have to deal with tomorrow and focus on the immediate. I think we're also, what's been exciting for us is taking the organization on the journey with us. So it's been great to have this vision of what we thought we could build. We're really getting, the muscle is built, the capability is there. And I think the organization has embraced it and really seeing, the power of what this could be for the future of the Lauder portfolio.
Yeah, no, completely. And actually, Shauna, this is a great question for you. We have some people talking about pivots, and a pivot itself feels like you failed at something and you've had to re-engineer yourself. And they're talking about kind of hiding that pivot when they're talking to investors because they don't want to disclose that they've had that kind of big bump along the way. What would your guidance be to somebody who's pivoted a business and then is pitching?
I think trust. I mean, if it is an investor that saw your vision, they're going to understand that process. We just had a founder who did come to us and very honestly said, I need to talk to you. This is where I'm at. This is where I'm seeing the difficulties, and then we were able to take her and pivot her and say, okay, based on that's part of what our role is, right? Our role is to we take a very mission-based approach. So if one hypothesis didn't prove out, then we're going to build on the knowledge and the skill set that founder has to continue to understand that space and see where we need to go. So I think I 100% believe in honesty. And I also think that you don't underestimate what you brought, what initially got that investor excited in you.
You hide from pivoting, I guess, if you've done it in the past.
Sorry, Chris, the internet cut out there. Can you, or maybe
no problem. We're just talking. We have a few questions around pivoting your business and. Her internet might be in and out.
Yeah, I think I'm losing you a little bit too, Chris.
All good, no problem at all. We'll jump back on. Shauna, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you better now. You were going in and out.
Excellent, that's great. Can we talk about your the support system that you see around founders and how they can use mentors and potentially boards and things to help them kind of navigate kind of the bumps along the way? Do you have any kind of thoughts around kind of mentorship and reaching outside your business to kind of gain some perspective?
Yeah, no, I think being really strategic about who you bring into your board or advisory panel is critical, and being thoughtful about it. So really, what we've seen that has been helpful is bringing others from outside your immediate vertical, right? So for example, in beauty, fashion is a great parallel. So really, if you bring someone on from that space that's been innovated and somewhat tangentially related to what you're trying to build, really bringing in that perspective. Or from our perspective, we believe the value of Lauder sitting as an advisor. I mean, we have the wealth of knowledge in terms of across any touch point of the value chain. We're able to bring in the best of the best, but build on a history and a wealth of failure. So we're really we've navigated those. So it's helpful for us to also, share those experiences. And also what we're trying to do is really understand what's emerging in the space from a vendor perspective. So how can we as a team also link founders to innovative external vendors that are really trying to shape the space as well, and kind of bridge connections in order to kind of bring the best product to market.
No, that's great. And Michelle, hopefully you can hear me now. I'm just wondering how you use a support system in your kind of approach to business. Do you have outside mentors or things that you reach out to that are really outside of your business, outside of your partners?
Oh man, yeah, there's a lot. Look, I think that first of all, I get super nervous on who I trust. Your board is both your board and they're your boss. So you have to be super thoughtful around. I am ready to cry a river to this person because sometimes you need your mother to cry to, not your board. And so I would totally agree that having boards, look, my litmus for a board member, and I would totally agree, like having someone with like the Estee Lauder knowledge is like just insane to have that. Also having the individual person does matter, and their calmness really matters a lot, right? Here's the reality is that even the most successful companies were not up and to the right the whole way around. And so you have to do the litmus test where you have to call your board members or imagine calling your board members and telling them a terrible piece of news and seeing if what they're about to say for you is going to make you a lot calmer or a lot more nervous. And board members really do have that choice, right? They can be like, this is really bad. Do you know how bad this is? And you're like, I fully know how bad this is. Trust me, as a founder, it all blows up in my head. It's all very, very, very bad. Like this is my baby that I'm going to lose. And then you have board members, and I think we've largely been able to find these folks who, we had a big problem, and I got on the phone with one of our board members, and she was like, well, you should just know that I had a company that went public, and 3 days later they had this problem. So it was a lot worse for them than it is for you right now. And there is nothing like that gives you an incredible sense of calm. Have I used other people? I mean, the most important people by far, by a huge margin, are, your partner, like your literally your life partner that you keep in your life. That is like the number one probably source of support. The next is your co-founders and how well they deal with that. I've certainly had coaches and mentors along the way, but the fraction that they have is far smaller. And there are some good folks there, but they're never really the same. And then your board, you should think about how they make you calmer, not how they make you more anxiety ridden, because this job has a lot of anxiety to begin with.
I would love to ask you both this question. Almost, if you could mentor yourself, what would you tell your younger self so that you could kind of navigate what your future life was ahead of you a bit easier? Michelle, maybe start there. How would you mentor yourself as a young entrepreneur?
Oh man, I would have told myself to stop taking everything so seriously. Like I overthought and probably still overthink every single decision as opposed to, making it. And part of me just has a personality type where I hate to clean up messes. So I'm like, oh God, we'll do this right once the first time. But I mean, look, it's speed is more important than being perfect. And I talk about this a lot, how the education system is set up to make people perfect, right? The education system rewards 100 is better than 90 is better than 80. And being a founder is not about getting 100%. It's about executing 3 times faster. It's about, what Shauna said, is about understanding a customer in a totally different way. I mean, customers are changing. I actually think I just saw a great pitch on like men's nail polish or whatever. I think you guys might be an investor. I'm not sure. But anyway, it was like, there's a whole new group of understanding what, like, look at even how beauty has changed in the last years. Like our own definition of beauty has gone so far beyond what we saw in an ad 10 years ago. It's like, are you understanding that customer? Is key.
That's great. And Shauna, what advice would you give your younger self?
I think it's have confidence. So I think, I instinctively could get from point A to point B faster than others. But because others weren't there on that journey with me, I underestimated the conclusion of getting to point B. I think, as I've matured or gotten older, I think it's really been able, building the skill set to take people on that journey has been critically important, particularly as we've kind of come into this role, because this is naturally the characteristic of what we're doing. But it really has been that, and accepting failure. I think we were always so scared to fail. It may have been culturally or just the environments of the circles that you were, performing against, that you didn't really see the value of failure. And I think it's really, spending time embracing it and then learning from it and then building on it, versus agonizing about it occurring.
Mm-hmm. No, completely. And we have a question here about choosing an industry or an idea to work on as a founder. And Michelle, going from caviar to fintech, maybe you'd be a great person to answer this, is how do you have the confidence to tackle an industry problem, right?
Okay, so the first thing that I firmly believe is that you have a huge advantage not being from AV industry. And so I'll give you an example of a great founder that I personally backed and Clearbank has backed. A woman named Catherine Hormuth that started a company called ShareTex. She makes indestructible pantyhose. The story of how she did this was absolutely unbelievable. She figured out that she could weave bulletproof fiber into like a thin enough weave to make something that looked like a pantyhose. And she broke something like 1,000 sewing machines in China trying to do this and get this done. And she's created, one of the most extraordinary products, which is like, why are we in 2020 and pantyhose are still ripping? I mean, given hopefully we'll get out of our houses one day and we will be able to wear pantyhose again, barring that. But she could do that and she could see that because she wasn't from the industry. Because if you had talked to, I don't know, what would it have been, 20, 30, 50,000 professionals that had worked in the hosiery, industry, they would have said that's not possible to do. And I think that it was the same thing in fintech for me. I mean, there was a million people that saw this as an opportunity and they were just like, there's a lot of rules on why we can't do this and why this doesn't make sense. And so the first thing is you should not be scared about choosing an industry. You should be deeply curious. You should read everything. You should talk to everyone and try and figure out what's making an industry tick. But never for a second should you feel like you're at a disadvantage because you're not an insider. And I think that's just enormously critical. Then the second thing is you want to make sure that you are not swimming upstream. So I would call, trying to sell fax machines today, like swimming upstream. You want an industry that's like large and growing where the dynamics are, really, really good in that. And so I think we started to see the early signs of that in fintech in 2015. As I was talking about earlier, I don't think that was extremely obvious, but you're looking for industries that are growing and you're looking for industries oftentimes it can have incumbents that can be very large and flat-footed because they take longer to catch up to you. So they either figure out, how to do what Lauder did, which is like partner, buy, or build, and have a really, really strong strategy on doing that. But I mean, there's lots of sleepy industries where you can come in, and it was one of the things that we knew about the banks. And look, I say this all the time at Clearco. Your only advantage as a founder is speed. And this is a really important reality check you need. It's like everyone else has more money than you. They have better political connections than you. They have smarter people that can work for you because they have real money to pay them. So the only thing you can do better is move faster. And that is something that almost every large company has a hard problem. And it's a reality because it's, compliance and it's people and it's alignment and it's priorities and it's all those things that produce slowness. But that actually means that you need to be checking on your team every day, because if you're not moving fast, you've lost your biggest competitive advantage. So that's a little bit how I think about that.
That's great. And Shauna, because you're investing in founders, are all of your founders having backgrounds in health, beauty, and wellness, or are they coming from completely different industries?
Completely different industries. All stories are independent, right? I think really ultimately it was they identified a need. So there was a need in their immediate life or in their immediate communities that they identified and they went to solve. So it could be that, one day you woke up and you are in menopause and you want to find a solution for that. And all of a sudden you've entered into beauty to attack it. And I think it's really that, that's really the differentiator, is the ability and the capacity to find a need and to Michelle's point, really drive a business against it. and own that space and create something that can actually live and breathe amongst the kind of the big sharks as well.
That's great. And we're getting some questions around raising capital at kind of a pre-revenue or pre-customer stage, like very early on. And we also are having questions around female founders who are in that spot because they're underserved today on the average anyway. How would you approach that as a female founder in trying to raise very early stage capital? What are the kind of steps that you would take personally to do that? Maybe Shauna, you would start.
I think to Michelle's point, understanding the minimum you need to get to the point of validation is what I think would be critical. So how much do you really need to test out the concept? And once you're able to demonstrate that there is resonance, then go on, you'd be able to trade on a different multiple. So really understanding that minimum is critical.
Michelle, any thoughts there?
Yeah. So I would encourage you to do absolutely everything you possibly can to get your business off the ground, beg, borrow, and steal without doing a seed round pre-revenue. Mm-hmm. Your seed round is the most expensive money you will ever take. I will be totally upfront. We have now paid our seed investors at Clearco 377 times their money, and they're not done. They're riding that up with us. Hopefully it's going up, but 377 times their money. Are you fucking kidding me? That's insane. Like that, if you did that as an APR, that is crazy. So, and I mean, look, did it feel worth it at the time? Could I have been, even scrappier and tried to find resources when they don't exist? The other thing is you have no idea how your world changes when you go from pitching a concept to pitching traction, because especially in spaces that are, I would say, less down like the middle of the fairway, most of the time you're going to spend is talking about people's personal biases on if they would use a product or not. And this is just the reality of VCs being a human-to-human industry. I mean, like at Clearco, we don't even look at what your product is. Like, we don't know who you are. We don't look at which product it is. We look at your sales, look at your return on ad spend. We look at a bunch of data that's coming from your accounts, but we actually don't care what you're selling. And that allows us to see things from a totally different view, because in the early days, I mean, all I talked about, like, people are like, well, we don't think people will need this, right? We don't think men will buy nail polish. Oh, we don't think this. And then you just sit there with someone else's biases, and that conversation changes really quickly when you get to say, I don't care if you like it or not, but I've done $10 million in sales in 2 months. And people are like, okay, you have my attention. And it doesn't even matter. I mean, it could be, you could have, $10,000 of sales and $100,000 of sales, or whatever growth trajectory you are on. But talking about your business is way different than talking about your idea. And so I think, that's my advice, is that, it feels like you need it. It feels like at the early age, you need a brand agency, or you need to have things perfect. Like, you just need to launch and see if people want to buy your product. And you can usually do that in some fairly inexpensive ways. And if you're a first-time founder, you should definitely look at our Clear Angel product that actually guides you through so many of those things. Like, this is your first set of OKRs and your first to-do list. This is exactly when you should be negotiating with your supplier. We give you that capital and we take a rev share on it, so that you don't end up in the situation where, you gave up, I think we gave up 5% of our company in the early days. And that's been definitely the most expensive capital that I've taken on so far.
Yeah, no, completely. And kind of to that point, in building a career like you both have, do you have a kind of a legacy or something that you want to kind of leave behind to the kind of broader market or to people that have been following you along the years? Shauna, do you want to maybe comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's that you shaped innovation in a new and creative way. I think, going back to your question on what I had never expected myself to be in a creative building role. And so it's really been exciting to be able to shape this. I think our last transactions, just as an example, they got brought into the portfolio at 500 million. So it's rare to bring in brands at $500 million at this stage. And we'd like to continue with our activities to be able to continue to supplement and add to the portfolio. But really, it is to deliver value creation across the ecosystem. So really, that's kind of, as we are looking at incubation, we're really bringing in partners from across the ecosystem to really create unique structures where we're all aligned to deliver something new and unique and create as much value for everybody in that process.
Yeah, that's an exciting mission, Shauna. And those are some big brands. That's very impressive. Michelle, do you ever kind of think about legacy and what the broader impact you'd like to make?
Yeah, I mean, we think about what the world could look like if every founder that had an incredible idea was able to get access to capital to build that idea and not have to spend 3 to 6 months raising it and not have to be a part of a certain circle of people to do that. And we think about the world that will unlock. And it could be extraordinary, right? I think about, even with the last question, another friend of mine started a company called Nixwear. They started by making leak-proof underwear, which is essential if you're a woman that definitely leaks at least once a month. And I remember hearing, because we were the same age and we kind of, grew up in the same vintage, and like every VC was like, I don't understand this. And I mean, she has a well over $100 million business now that has been built on that. And so I think about all of the people like her that have incredible ideas, and what that means if we can empower all of them, and we'll build a world that I think can look very different.
Michelle, building on it, I think what you're doing is truly remarkable, because I've been talking to founders and talking to friends, and somebody said something very along on the same lines. I was like, well, giving $10,000 grants or $25,000 grants almost doesn't feel meaningful. And he said to me, he's like, if you had given me $10,000 when I was 22 years old, do you know the creativity you would have been able to unlock? And right now I feel like just the burdens of like the day-to-day had stifled that. So I think it could be truly exciting what you could bring to the market.
Thank you.
Yeah, and some of the things that we're getting in the comments are around kind of mental health and perseverance and kind of moving forward. And do you have any advice for kind of founders and leaders that you would want to leave them with today on kind of where they're at in their journey and what perspective they should maybe have? Michelle, do you want to start with that?
Yeah, I think, my number one piece of advice is to keep going, right? I think this job feels lonely. I think it feels lonelier because we feel we're still, in a not totally connected world anymore. But this is a game of, grind out another little bit and just keep showing that creativity. And to what Shauna was saying, it's like about finding that creativity again, right? We all have so much excitement. It doesn't feel like work when you're doing something you love. And so, choosing the industry, the problem, and then going after that. But I think there's a lot of people here that are just in the normal parts of the founder journey. I wanted to give up so many times. It's not abnormal. Like, that is not abnormal. I was like, I cannot handle this anymore. I told myself that many, many, many times. I was like, there is a million things you could have done, Michelle, that would be easier than this. And those are all true. But then you just got to give yourself one more day. You got to give yourself a big sleep, and you got to start, fighting the world the next day. And when you keep fighting the good fight, it's just shots on goal at the end of the day. It's like when you keep trying, like something always, always, always gives as an entrepreneur, and it always ends up working out.
Oh, that's great. Shauna, do you have any kind of final advice for our listeners today?
I think ultimately avenues like this and really just building out a community of your peers and really hearing stories. I've been just surprised by the beauty, especially the communities founders have built and the support network that they have amongst themselves. Also just across collaboration. I really think there's value in all of us bringing each other up. And so we really don't view it as something of a competitive tension. I really embrace the journeys that all of us are on, and, speak as freely as you can amongst yourselves and continue to kind of expand, what Founder Maids trying to do and other groups alike.
Yeah, this is great. And I think based on some of the comments,
use this network. I mean, my forum group and like groups like this were incredibly helpful, because you have a group of people that are non-competitive with you that can remind you that this is all normal, what you're feeling.
That's tremendous. And I think based on the comments, this was a very cathartic session for a lot of founders as well. So we'll probably have to revisit this topic at some time in the future. And I just want to thank Shauna and Michelle for taking the time to do this today, and our partners at FounderMade. I think this was a very timely topic to a lot of founders. And Megan, maybe I'll pass it over to you to talk about the next session.
I mean, I have to say, this is one of my favorite talks. I got so much. It's like speed over perfection. I loved also you can start a business with 10 to 30K in 3 months and figure out if it's a good idea or not, because so many times people are staying with their businesses, just not knowing when to pivot or not knowing, if they have product market fit. I honestly and you can see with the panel and the comments are comments of, I mean, thank you guys. Thank you so much. It's been really, really great to have you guys in the industry, telling us, all of this wisdom that we are all taking with us. So with that, you can, for all of those founders that, obviously want Michelle Romano's energy and want to be involved, and Clearco's an incredible resource for all of you. I mean, they're building like light speed. These ones, they know speed. So please, connect with them, and you can find them on our homepage. And then for our next shows, we have a ton of great shows that are coming up. We have some power hours happening August 18th. We have in August 25th, and then we have our Future in Beauty and Wellness show with a ton of great founders and from beauty, like the founder of Olaplex, you name it. That's for Future of Beauty on September 23rd. And with that, email us, let us know how how we can build community while we're all still in the midst of this new reality that we're living in. And thank you guys. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Shauna. Thanks, Michelle. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. Bye.
Thanks, Megan. Thanks, everyone.